Western Front, Normandy, France. Date: August 14, 1944. The mud of the Norman bocage, churned into a viscous chocolate-brown glue by months of relentless combat, held everything captive. Tank treads spun uselessly, supply trucks lay defeated on their sides, and the great Allied offensive, Operation Cobra, threatened to stall, drowning not in blood, but in mud and poor logistics. But then, a sound. Not the deep, complex roar of a Sherman, but a high-pitched, almost frantic whine. Through the driving rain and the thick hedgerows came the least likely savior of the logistics train. The Willys MB, the general-purpose vehicle, the Jeep. This squat, boxy, unassuming little car, initially commissioned in the frantic scramble of 1940 as a simple four-wheel drive scouting vehicle, was met with a mixture of confusion and open mockery by the sophisticated armies of Europe. The German engineers, obsessed with the monumental scale of the Blitzkrieg's machinery, simply laughed. They called it a toy. They saw the thin body panels, the open sides, and they compared it to our heavy Kübelwagen or the complex half-tracks, and they dismissed it. The Americans had arrived with a weapon of war that looked like a child's buggy. That was the profound, dangerous irony of 1941. The T-shape of the vehicle, the result of a grueling 49-day design sprint by the Bantam Car Company, was Spartan by design and brutally effective by necessity. Its dimensions were rigid: 78 inches for the wheelbase, 600 pounds maximum weight, 60 inches track width. A machine designed not for elegance, but for pure, brutal utility. The heart of this utility was its transfer case and the robust Willys L134 Go Devil engine, capable of generating a mere 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, yet delivering torque precisely where needed. When it first appeared in North Africa and Sicily, German reports were filled with condescension. A captured officer's diary, later translated, noted, "The American Jeep is a charming but lightweight distraction. It will not withstand the true conditions of European warfare. It is fragile, its frame thin. It speaks to a lack of serious engineering." This dismissive attitude, however, was the very foundation of the fatal strategic error of the Axis forces. They failed to grasp the true nature of the Jeep. It was not a weapon. It was a multiplier of force. The logistical scale of the conflict demanded nothing less than a revolution in transport. By 1944, the American war machine was consuming staggering amounts of material. A single infantry division in sustained combat required over 600 tons of supplies per day. Trucks were too few, railroads too vulnerable to bombing. The battlefield required an omnipresent, indefatigable workhorse. The Jeep filled that gap, and then some. It could carry 3 men and a light machine gun, cross a railway track without a ramp, and be fixed by a field mechanic using little more than a wrench and stubborn determination. The engineers who conceived it, the procurement officers who championed it, understood one thing the Germans did not. In the vast industrialized hell of the Second World War, simplicity was the ultimate sophistication. But the Jeep's legend was forged not in the sterile environment of a design brief, but in the chaos of the front line. It became a frontline ambulance, a reconnaissance scout, a commander's staff car, and, most critically, a mobile anti-tank platform carrying the potent M1917 Browning 30 caliber machine gun, or the newly adopted bazooka. The final essential element was the unparalleled industrial scale. By the war's end, over 640,000 units of the Jeep and its Ford equivalent would roll off the assembly lines, a relentless torrent of simple, unstoppable utility that flooded every theater of war. The cumulative effect of this mechanical swarm would prove to be a logistical nightmare for the Axis powers, a logistical force that their heavy, over-engineered designs simply could not match. The question that hung over the muddy fields of Normandy was this: could this humble vehicle, designed to be disposable and cheap, truly impact a conflict dominated by tanks weighing 50 tons and aircraft capable of supersonic dives? Could it, in fact, defeat the pride of German engineering? The answer would come not through a head-on collision, but through a brutal, logistical, and often unseen trial of strength. If you're captivated by these untold stories of technological drama and human resilience during the war, hit the subscribe button and notification bell. Your support ensures we can continue uncovering the fascinating, often ironic truths of World War II history. The German strategy in the West relied on two key pillars: the engineering superiority of their heavy armor and the rapid, focused movement of mechanized divisions. They built the Panther, 171, a technological marvel, armed with the formidable KWK-42L77, 5 cm gun, and protected by thick, sloped armor that Allied shells often simply glanced off. It was a beast of unparalleled killing power, but its sophistication was also its Achilles heel. The Panther, weighing in at nearly 45 tons, was a maintenance disaster waiting to happen. Its complex Maybach HL230 P30 V12 engine often ran too hot. Its revolutionary yet intricate interleaved road wheel system was a nightmare to repair when clogged with mud or damaged by mines. A veteran German tank crewman, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter, recounted the agonizing reality. "We had the greatest tank ever built. When it was running, it was invincible. But in Russia and later in France, the roads broke us. If a track link snapped or a final drive failed, it could take a team a day or more to replace it in the field. When fuel was short, the Panther became a very expensive roadblock. We were terrified of the mud, not the enemy shells." In stark contrast, the American strategy embraced the concept of mass-produced, field-repairable mobility. The Jeep was the physical embodiment of this philosophy. Its simple, robust frame and accessible components meant that two men with basic tools could usually get a crippled Jeep running again within an hour. This difference in downtime had catastrophic strategic consequences for the Axis. Consider the speed of the advance. After the breakout from Normandy, the Allied forces needed to cover hundreds of miles, securing bridges and maintaining a constant flow of fuel and ammunition. This was the era of the Red Ball Express, the legendary high-speed trucking operation. But the Red Ball trucks could only follow the paved roads, which were often choked with the wreckage of battle. The Jeep, however, was born for the dirt and the debris. With its Dana 18 transfer case engaged in low-range four-wheel drive, it could traverse fields, climb hillsides, and cut across the countryside, pioneering new routes. It became the lifeline for forward observers, radio operators, and medics. The Jeep was also surprisingly versatile in its ability to adapt to specialized roles. It was modified to tow the 37mm anti-tank gun, becoming a lightweight tank destroyer. It was equipped with communications arrays, transforming into a mobile command center, and crucially, it was utilized by the legendary Pathfinders and Special Forces. The British SAS famously used armored jeeps, stripping them down and mounting twin Vickers K machine guns, turning them into high-speed desert raiders that operated deep behind enemy lines. The sheer numbers also began to tell the story of industrial power. While Germany poured its dwindling resources into building a few hundred Panthers and Tigers, the Allies were producing thousands of jeeps. Each Jeep represented not just a vehicle, but a saved human life, a successfully delivered dispatch, or a crucial piece of equipment reaching the front just in time. The irony deepened as the war raged on. The Germans, with their engineering pride, developed complex, bespoke vehicles for every function. The Americans designed a single vehicle, the Jeep, that could fulfill every function. It was a victory of standardization over specialization, of practical ruggedness over theoretical perfection. The psychological impact on the German frontline soldier was profound. The incessant presence of the American Jeep became a symbol of the seemingly endless American industrial might. Hauptmann Dieter Hess, a logistics officer captured near the Ardennes, admitted, "We could destroy 2 American tanks and our morale would rise. But then you would see a dozen of those little green Jeeps buzzing past with full loads, laughing at the mud, and you knew the fight was pointless. They could replace everything instantly. Their little machine was everywhere. It was like fighting a swarm of angry bees." The strategic calculus was clear. The Panther represented the zenith of tactical killing power, but the Jeep represented the unstoppable, relentless logistical staying power of the Allied machine. And in a total war, staying power always wins. The stage was now set for a physical confrontation that would illustrate this difference in the most dramatic, public way imaginable. The small toy would challenge the great beast. The battle lines of the late summer of 1944 were not just drawn with trenches and tank traps. They were drawn in the mechanical DNA of the opposing forces. The Americans were pushing hard, often ahead of their own supply lines, and the Germans were desperately trying to use their heavy armor as fire brigades to seal the gaps. This particular drama unfolded near the small, ruined French town of Briquebec. A German Panzer unit attempting a localized counterattack had managed to penetrate an Allied column, but their primary force, two formidable Panther Ausf G tanks, became victims of the Western Front's most enduring weapon, the rain-soaked soil. One Panther, heavily bogged down during a maneuvering error, was firmly entrenched to its glacis plate. Attempts by German half-tracks and even an accompanying salvage vehicle to pull it free were futile. The delicate transmission simply could not handle the immense strain against the suction of the clay. The crew had abandoned the tank, intending to return at night with heavier equipment, but the Americans reached the wreck first. This abandoned Panther became a tactical problem for the advancing U.S. Army Corps. It blocked the narrow dirt track crucial for bringing forward artillery and fuel. A recovery crew was immediately dispatched, but the designated heavy recovery vehicle, the enormous Diamond T-980, was miles behind, stuck in its own traffic jam. The clock was ticking. It was Sergeant Ben "Pappy" Harrison, a motor pool veteran, who saw the opportunity. He wasn't a hero, he was a mechanic, and he understood the mechanical advantage. He had been towing incapacitated Shermans using a pair of jeeps lashed together, a common field expedient demonstrating the unexpected tensile strength of the little vehicle's frame. He drove his own Willys MB, reinforced with a standard, albeit heavy-duty, pintle hitch mounted on the rear crossmember. His plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Attempt to shift the 45-ton German behemoth using his one-ton Jeep. The narrative of this moment is preserved in post-action reports and interviews. The soldiers gathered around, snickering nervously. The absurdity was not lost on anyone. A machine built by the pride of German engineering, a masterpiece of ballistic science, was to be wrestled by a four-cylinder truck the size of a billiard table. Harrison's technique was not about raw power, but about torque multiplication and traction control. He ordered his men to secure the Jeep's tires with heavy logs and rocks, ensuring maximum static friction. He attached a complex arrangement of heavy tow chains, standard-issue U.S. Army 5 to 8-inch links, connected to a strong point on the Panther's main tow shackle. He engaged the Jeep's transmission, the Warner T84 3-speed manual, into first gear, low range. This combination gave the small engine a gear ratio capable of achieving maximum torque at the wheels. The engine, running on its meager 60 horsepower, let out a tortured, high-pitched scream that cut through the silence. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the chain went taut. The Jeep's rear tires bit into the earth, throwing up geysers of mud. For a terrifying 10 seconds, nothing happened. The Jeep seemed to squat, its suspension screaming under the load. Then, with a grinding, metallic sigh that seemed to echo the defeat of the Third Reich's logistics, the Panther moved. The small, constant, relentless pull of the Jeep's transmission, far below the speed that would break a heavier engine, began to overcome the force of static friction and the suction of the mud. Harrison didn't try to pull it out completely, he merely shifted its angle, enough to dislodge the most stubborn point of contact. The Panther, the pride of the Wehrmacht, a symbol of military terror, was dragged sideways, just enough to break the suction. The whole process, from the first roar of the Go Devil engine to the point where the Panther was free enough to be recovered by its own crew, if they had been present, took precisely 3 minutes and 18 seconds. The silent realization on the faces of the Allied soldiers was profound. It wasn't the strength of the Jeep that mattered. It was the efficiency of its design, its ability to deliver its limited power into a controlled, sustained pull. The American design was flexible and forgiving. The German design brittle and punishingly heavy. This incident, though small, became a symbolic victory. It demonstrated that the American genius lay not in building the most powerful individual machine, but in building the most effective system of machines, a system where the smallest, most numerous component could, through sheer utility and reliable torque, humble the largest, most technologically complex component of the enemy. The age of monumental, beautiful engineering was being superseded by the age of practical, repeatable industrial logistics. The Jeep was not a toy, it was the ultimate strategic tool. The single act of a Jeep shifting a Panther was not an isolated incident. It was the dramatic climax of thousands of daily unnoticed acts of resilience. This omnipresence of the little vehicle began to etch a deep psychological toll on the Axis forces. The Jeep's role was fundamentally one of disruption. German forces relied heavily on fixed lines of communication and clear hierarchies. The sight of an American general, such as the formidable General George S. Patton, cruising across the front lines in an open-air Jeep, seemingly unconcerned by the proximity of the enemy, represented a terrifying fluid command structure. The enemy could be anywhere, and their commanders were always present, directing their armies from the thick of the action, not from remote, reinforced bunkers. The Jeep as a psychological weapon. Speed and agility. The German heavy armor was designed for direct engagement and structured movement. The Jeep, with its speed and low profile, could dart across fire zones, performing run-and-gun reconnaissance, often drawing heavy fire that revealed German positions, only to disappear before the counterfire could be effectively targeted. The element of surprise. The Jeep became a favorite vehicle for raiding parties. It could be camouflaged easily. Its four-wheel drive capacity, allowing it to travel through dense woods and fields, emerging suddenly to attack rear echelon units, disrupt supply depots, and sever vital communication cables. To the German soldier, the silence of the Jeep's approach in the low gear was often more terrifying than the roar of an approaching tank. Personalization and morale. Allied soldiers, recognizing its utility, personalized their Jeeps with names, painted designs, and field modifications. This gave the vehicle a unique, almost legendary character. For the American GI tout, the Jeep represented freedom, rugged reliability, and the connection to the industrial power of home. For the German soldier, it represented the endless, faceless wave of material that was slowly crushing them. A former German machine gunner, interviewed decades later, spoke of the shift in perception. In 1941, we would see an abandoned Jeep and laugh at the simplicity of its wiring. By 1944, we saw one, and we knew it was a message. It meant American intelligence, or worse, American command was just ahead. It meant more pressure, more speed, more everything. We feared the Sherman because it killed us. We hated the Jeep because it outwilled us. It was always moving, always delivering, always surviving. Technological adaptations. The Jeep's platform was so versatile that it led to crucial, rapid field engineering innovations. The field ambulance Jeep. Its ability to navigate treacherous terrain turned it into a vital component of battlefield casualty evacuation, saving countless lives by reaching the wounded faster than any heavier vehicle could. Its rugged suspension, despite being bone-jarring, was preferred to the possibility of being stuck behind enemy lines. Winch and recovery. The implementation of the capstan winch as a field modification further enhanced the Jeep's utility. This addition allowed it to pull itself out of deep mud and, more importantly, assist in the recovery of other, larger vehicles that had become stranded. It was, paradoxically, often the lightest vehicle that recovered the heaviest. The contrast between German engineering elegance and American industrial pragmatism was never sharper. The Germans designed the Volkswagen Kübelwagen, Type 82, an air-cooled rear-wheel drive vehicle that was aesthetically pleasing and efficient on dry ground, but lacked the fundamental low-range four-wheel drive needed for the mud of the Ostfront and the Westfront. The Jeep, with its high ground clearance and aggressive torque, proved the superior off-road machine in the most hostile environments. The simple, standardized Jeep became the indispensable tool for overcoming the most complex challenge of the Western Front: the rapid movement of personnel and vital supplies across non-existent infrastructure. The speed of the Allied advance, which saw them cross France in weeks instead of months, was not just the result of firepower. It was the result of 1 million individual journeys made by the unassuming, relentless Willys MB. The small box on wheels was, in its own way, the key to unlocking the entire European campaign. The war's climax arrived, and the role of the Jeep was cemented not in a single decisive battle, but in the sustained, unstoppable momentum of the final months. From the treacherous snows and ice of the Battle of the Bulge, where its lightweight structure and four-wheel drive gave it superior mobility over the heavy, sliding German tanks, to the final push across the Rhine, the Jeep was there. The ability of the Jeep to use less fuel, require less road space and demand less maintenance translated directly into a higher operational tempo for the Allied armies. While Hitler's war effort sputtered and stalled due to fractured supply lines and chronic fuel shortages, the complex gas-guzzling Panther could only drive an average of 70 miles before refueling. The ubiquitous Jeep ensured that every American unit, no matter how remote, remained connected and supplied. The post-war irony and legacy. The ultimate irony of the Jeep's story is its enduring legacy. The vehicle that the Germans initially mocked as a toy became the essential blueprint for post-war military and utility vehicles globally. Engineering precedent. The Willys MB introduced several key concepts that revolutionized military and civilian transport. Standardized 4x4 drivetrain proved the supreme value of four-wheel drive in military applications, a standard that every subsequent military transport vehicle would adopt. Integrated utility design showed that a single simple frame could accommodate dozens of roles, drastically simplifying manufacturing and supply. Durability. Over perfection. The Jeep established the philosophy that a vehicle designed to be easily repaired in a ditch is strategically superior to one that must be returned to a factory for minor faults. The engineers on both sides, looking back, acknowledged the Jeep's true power. Colonel Robert R.J. Ringen, a U.S. Army ordnance expert, summed up the prevailing view. The German army built a tank that was beautiful. It was terrifyingly powerful, but it was built to a specification of perfection, not to a reality of war. The Jeep was built to a specification of survival. It was ugly, it was uncomfortable, but it was relentless. It was the mechanical equivalent of the American GI, practical, tough, and impossible to stop. The final tally speaks volumes about industrial warfare. While fewer than 6,000 Panther tanks were produced, the production of nearly 648,000 Jeeps, Willys and Ford variants, provided the strategic depth necessary to win the war of attrition. The Jeep cost approximately $1,000 per unit, a fraction of the Panther's cost, yet its tactical reach was infinitely broader. The Jeep's impact extended far beyond the battlefield. It returned home and, as the Willys CJ, civilian Jeep, became the ancestor of every modern SUV and off-road vehicle. The legend of the small machine that could pull a massive tank out of the mud was not just a wartime anecdote, it was the birth of a new era of personal, all-terrain mobility. The unassuming Willys MB did not fire the decisive shot of the Second World War, but it carried the generals who ordered the attacks, the medics who saved the lives, the ammunition that sustained the fire, and the dispatches that coordinated the advance. It was the simple, tireless engine of the Allied victory. Next time you see an iconic four-wheel drive vehicle tackling a rough road, remember its ancestor, the boxy little truck that was mocked by the pride of German engineering, only to conquer the Western Front one muddy mile at a time. It proved that sometimes the most sophisticated weapon is the one that is the most simple, the most durable, and the most abundant. The true measure of a military machine is not how fast it can kill, but how relentlessly it can work. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the fascinating, underappreciated technological battle of World War II. If you enjoyed this journey into the strategic and human stories behind the hardware, please like this video, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more historical analysis and untold wartime dramas.